Hello, everyone, and welcome to the world's most famous podcast. I'm your hostess, Jacqueline Maddison. Today we have a very special guest, Meegan Whelan. Whether you are going through a divorce or a professional transition in your life, Meegan can use her 20 plus years of experience in counseling and coaching to help you reimagine your purpose and create a life that meets your highest potential. She is a certified life coach specializing in personal transformation and emotional well-being and career clarity. So let's welcome Meegan to the show. Meegan Whelan, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, awesome. So let's dive right in. I want to learn all about you and how did you become a life coach and where did that begin for you?
Yeah, I grew up in New England, and when I was younger, my mom actually passed away, and I quickly went to a therapist, and I remember being really intuitive, and I just knew that it didn't feel right. So I spent the first 15 years of my life, I was a director of wellness, I was a therapist in schools, I would work with the board, I would do curriculum building, and I always had a caseload and worked with families and kids. And at some point, I just felt like in therapy, I could work and I could sit in the emotion, and then there was just something missing. And so that missing is why I went into coaching. It's really about action and creating really tangible steps to create a transformation. So I think the foundation of therapy coupled with that really creates a powerful combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, what sets your coaching approach apart from others in the industry, based obviously on your own personal life experience?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great coaches out there. I think that, I started a company called Scoop, and our foundation is really on strategy and it's
Mm,
on practical research and knowledge. I did a lot with positive psychology. So I
mm,
really look at the individual and the core of who you are, what has shaped your life so far. I
yeah,
think that developmental background and then creating the coaching framework really creates a more depth-oriented transformation and process. I
yeah.
also think, my focus has always been on communication, even when I was in schools. So I really think there's a crisis now of just connection and communication. So whether I'm
Right,
working, in a boardroom or whether I'm sitting at the dinner table with my four kids, I
right.
truly am always in that mindset of just how can we become more connected? How can we talk with clarity? How can we create communication that has our needs met? So
Yeah.
I think that framework also really sets me aside in terms of my background and just that focus.
Yeah, I love that. I say all the time, 100% of the time, lack of communication is the problem, and 100% of the time, communication is the solution.
I love that. That's so good. That could be a
Right?
good tagline for me.
If we could only just all be mature enough to sit down and talk about it without, getting out of control and letting our emotions take over.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's
I
why we
know.
need people like you.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
know it's funny. I did a ton of emotional regulation, with kids and families forever, and it's just unbelievable how much I use it now. Whether I'm talking to a CEO or whether I'm talking to a business owner or a, parent, it really applies to how to kind of pause and really think intentionally about what you're saying, why you're saying it, and the goal you want. And so I use it a lot day to day, whether, groups or clients. It really comes back to the therapy and just really integrating that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a skill set that we all need to master. Now, you
Absolutely.
focus on emotional resilience and personal transformation, which is huge, and I think we all desire that in our lives. Why are these areas so important, especially in today's world?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone would say just our culture right now is just filled with so many unknowns.
Yeah,
And if you look at unknowns, or even in my therapy or client, so much of our anxiety, our overwhelm, whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
comes from the fear of just not knowing. And I
right.
think there's so much unpredictability right now. And
Mhm.
that puts everyone out of your comfort zone. And people don't want to be out of their comfort zone. So I think when you have emotional resilience and you have the patience and the skills to sit in your emotion, you're going to be intentional about the next steps versus reactive and reacting from your emotional brain versus your really logical, rooted, grounded brain.
Right.
And so I think that switch alone really can be a game changer in how we lead, how we communicate, the decisions we make, how we work with the people in our family, in our business, in our teams. It really does transform how you show up if you have that resiliency and that kind of grit around communication and clarity.
Yeah, so true. And you're so right about that. I feel like we're kind of in this war of either living in fear, or for me, like
Yes.
I'm a Christian, so I live in faith. And it's like you can't
Yeah.
have both, right? So for me, this faith place is like, oh, God is in control. The things I can't control that would cause me to have anxiety, I trust God is in control. And for me, I believe God is good. So if he's in control, then only good can come of what he's controlling, right?
Right.
Otherwise,
Exactly.
there's fear. And then that is a terrible place to be in. So, how do
Yeah.
you coach people out of that place of fear? Is it an element of faith, of believing in a God, a higher power, or what's that for you in
Yeah, no.
teaching?
I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so it's a very faith-based city. I've always been in prayer groups and I can integrate, any type of faith into therapy or coaching because I really believe they go hand in hand. It's not an either or.
Right.
But I think when it comes to fear, everyone wants to numb it or move away from it,
So true.
right? Like we could go into it forever. I mean, I worked with addiction for a long time, and whether you're numbing it with alcohol or ice cream or whether you're, traveling nonstop and just don't want to stop and think, you're avoiding something. And
Right.
most of the time, you're avoiding something you're really scared of or something that is fearful. And
Mm-hmm.
so what I work with clients in is what if you changed your relationship with fear? What if fear is really about you're on the precipice of making a really breakthrough decision that could completely change your life? And it makes sense that there's fear, right?
Yeah.
Anything outside of our comfort zone is going to be scary. But
Yeah.
if you sit in it and create strategies and a structure that allow you to logically work through it, I think that's when the true breakthrough happens because you're able to create something you never thought was possible.
I love that. And you conquer your fear. Like, and for me, like my kind of faith paradigm is, there's a scripture that says God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So, anytime I sense anxiety, trying to get a grip or on the uncertainties, again, I kind of go back to the scripture. This is for me, what strategy helps me.
Right.
Now, do you bring people to their like childhood traumas, or are you dealing with real-time life situations that they're trying to where do you go,
Oh,
like, you know what I mean? Some people are
yeah.
like, oh, it's all about the childhood trauma, or
No.
what's it for
Yeah.
you?
I mean, I did that in my previous career. I would say if so I have a lot of executive clients that are women, like really high-powered women who are,
Mm,
battling, just dealing with the balance, just juggling,
right,
they could be running a company, have kids, doing it all, the
right,
imposter syndrome. I have a
right.
lot of people who are just going through that. If
Mm,
you bring something that is trauma-based, I can touch on it, but usually I'm always kind of like, you've probably processed some of that. Now what? Now, how do we
right.
take that understanding and how do we transform it into actionable, consistent steps that create real transferable change? So I think where I have had a lot of coaches even send clients to me is they'll say, there's a little bit of trauma background. I'm not comfortable. And I can definitely work with that. But it's more going to be focused on what you've learned from that and where do we go? Right?
Great.
We're not going to sit in the trauma anymore. We're going
Right.
to really actually create tangible steps. When we work, I also want to say we work a lot with teams in businesses. That's a ton of what we do at Scoop. So we'll go
Excellent.
into a business and we'll say, okay, like what's your pain point? Where do you want to be in a year? Why is your production low? Why are people from your survey saying that the retention numbers, right, are not where you want to be, that they don't feel supported? They don't communicate clearly within your office. So we do an assessment at the beginning and we really create a report that helps support business leaders decide what are the recommendations to transform the office. And I
Mm,
do that the same with clients. So I always start with a kind of like a assessment audit in the beginning that helps me know where's your confidence level? Where are your communication gaps? Where are your fears? Where do you want to be in 3 months, 6 months, a year? So I can really help paint a picture around where they want to drive their car and like where they want to be in the roadmap and
right.
help them get there.
I
So
love
it,
it. So you're an
yeah,
executive leadership life
yeah,
coach. So
yeah, you got it.
guiding people or counseling people to take control over all aspects of their life to kind of really, like you said, grow into their full potential.
Yeah, and I think whether you're a mom and you're struggling at home or you're a CEO, leadership to me is not, your opinion of just having all the right answers.
Right.
I think a true leader is within always, and it's about taking risks and admitting when you're wrong, not having all the answers, and being courageous to take leaps of faith, even though you're not sure the outcome, right? Like you might not know the outcome. So I think what we do with moms is really honestly mirroring exactly what we would do with a business and a team. It's all about transforming your life, finding your purpose, and taking the risk to get there.
I love it. I love it. Yeah,
Right.
because as they say, your dream life is just outside of your comfort zone. So you do have to grow and you have to take those actionable steps that are required because nothing's going to happen if you don't take action.
Right.
That's the
Absolutely.
key.
I
So,
know. I mean, yeah, keep
oh,
going.
please go on.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I was working with a mom this week and something happened at her child's school and he was severely bullied. And she was so irate that the school wasn't handling it in a way that was supporting her family or they weren't supporting her. And, you can stay in anger and just rage and resentment for a long time. But we know that the longer that sits in you, it's not serving you, right? It's not, you're not showing up the person you want to be when you're sitting with all those negative emotions. So, what we did is we really thought about what if you just somehow forgave this part for yourself and like what can you create for your child that's going to change the school environment in a positive way and create formidable change within your family and within you. And once we changed that mindset, it was as if you took off, 30 pounds of weight because she'd just been clinging and clinging to the anger and the resentment. So I think a lot about it is the mindset shift,
Yeah.
is changing the way you're looking at the hard, changing the way you're looking at the fear. And if you can have a more optimistic, hopeful attitude, I truly think your actions start to follow that. And then your life starts to really resemble the true life you want, like who you want to be in the next step.
Yeah, it's so true. It begins in the mind,
It does. It
you
does. It's a
know?
mindset shift. I do a ton with mindset work and just like helping people who maybe have a period or something happen where they are feeling negative. Like they do think life is really hard. I get.
Right.
So how can we find like the small wins, even if it's just 1% a day, that starts to feel more positive?
Right.
It builds on a habit, right? Even your mind can be a habit change.
So true. So that's what you were talking about before when you mentioned positive psychology.
Yes, yes, yes.
Ah,
Yeah. So, I mean, not to go down this road, but I did a ton of brain-based research when I was a psychologist. And, I think now with depression and anxiety, there's so much research that you can actually change the way your brain works and the
yeah.
way you think.
Yeah, we
And so,
actually had a neuroscience. We
oh,
interviewed
that's
him,
amazing.
and he talked about how you can rewire your brain.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes.
It's
So it's
fascinating.
It is, it is. And so I was a college athlete and I did a lot of work, as an athlete. And I look back, I'm like, I wish I had this then because it would have just been a transformable experience to, a day that you thought like was the worst game. And then you don't carry that on. Like you kind of end it and then you start over. So I wish I had those skills then, but it really helps just kind of recorrect, reset, not let the negativity continue to follow you and really show up in a way that you want to be.
It's so true. Like, I think we live in a world of duality, male, female, good, evil, light, dark, right? And I think we sometimes can waver between our light and darkness, our shadow self. And like, that's when we get pulled into the negativity and stuff. But forgiveness is such a key to like the door to the light, to staying in that place of letting go of toxic emotions and being able to elevate, and rise above any seemingly negative situations in our mind and in our hearts.
Yes, 100%. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think part of it too is sometimes, and I even do this with my kids, is sometimes I think we can make a lot of assumptions about a scenario. Like say there
it's
was just
true.
someone you had been, a friendship that had gone awry that you had just, really was not able to repair. And usually when I sit with a client, like what stories are you kind of making up about why that happened? Like what do you think that person meant? Or why do you think there was a conflict?
Mm,
And usually like my theory is sometimes it's assumptions that we make Maybe we think that person was thinking that, or we think that's what the person thinks about me. And when you look at it, is it an assumption or is it a fact? Because
Right.
usually it's an assumption. And I think when we operate on assumptions, that's when we get ourselves just down a train of momentum where
Mm.
things start to become bigger and bigger, but it's not really the real truth. So
Wow, that's powerful.
yeah,
That's like false reality. And I
yeah,
think it
right.
probably occurs a lot in marriages. There's
Oh,
these underlying assumptions that aren't true, and then you resent your spouse, whatever. So I love that you address these things, and you can really cause people to experience breakthrough by acknowledging the false ideas
right.
and step into truth, true reality.
Right. Yeah. And I used to do a lot of marriage family therapy work. I still coach a few couples, but you're absolutely true. I mean, so much of it is based on you didn't do the dishes, you don't care about me. Like
Mm,
I worked harder, or like you said you were going to do this and you didn't do this. And it just becomes this snowball of
mhm.
just bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
where I think so much of the time your just communication is not intact. You're not communicating really what you want from the person. So the
Right.
person really doesn't have 100% chance meeting your needs because they're guessing. It's like
Wow.
walking the dark with the dark.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of work of just saying like, what would it be like if you didn't assume that person's going to read your brain and you just ask for what you need,
I love that. Yeah,
right?
because you help clients in gaining clarity, and this
Right.
brings confidence. So how do you guide them towards that?
Yeah. So I think confidence is kind of one of those things that people always wait to feel ready to do something.
Mm,
Like, oh, if I'm going to drive cross country, I'll wait till next month. I'll wait till I feel ready. I don't think that works like that. I think confidence is something that you build. It's a muscle, right? I always joke, it's definitely in my athletic days, you're not going to get a six pack from going into the gym one day. That's just not how it's going to work.
yeah,
And I and I think
it's true.
confidence is the same, right? It's
Yeah.
building a muscle around something that you have not really done or you're not using often. So
Hmm.
I think it's small micro steps daily that increase your confidence, that increase your clarity, and increase your communication.
Yeah.
So, for example, I have a client who just has a really, really hard time confronting her boss. She feels like she's not being paid enough. She feels taken advantage of at times. And a lot of it is just that she has never had the conversation.
Right.
So, what we're doing is helping prep to feel okay, what's 1% tomorrow where you can increase your confidence to have this conversation with your boss?
Right.
And so he's been doing little things like emailing some things that are a little bit more direct.
Mm,
The following week, she sat him down and said, hey, can we schedule something next week? I'd love to talk to you further about the raise process. So
right.
it's a scaffolding of small steps that are leading up for confidence. And then it's also ultimately going to create communication that could be life changing,
I
right?
love that. So baby steps can lead to your biggest breakthroughs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I always use metaphors for years. I think a ladder's a really one. So, if you picture there's 12 rows on a ladder, you may not be ready to go to the 10th row. Like that might be a really, really big step,
Yeah.
whether it's in communication, asking for what you want, whether it's just building your own resiliency. But what if you start at two?
Yeah.
What would the second step look like? And then working your way up.
Yeah. I love that. So there's not so much pressure to have to do something you're not ready for.
Right,
Because
right.
growth for all of us is a journey and a gradual change of us developing our higher selves, really.
Yeah, and I think communication's tough. I think a lot of it was modeled how we grew up, right? Like
Yeah.
as much as you think anyone can become a great communicator, but I often find what was modeled does frame some of where you come from.
Yeah.
If you grew up in a family where you talked about everything and
Hmm.
everything was laid out there, you have a different lens of what communication is than
Right.
when you grew up in a family where you don't talk unless you're talked to, right?
Yeah.
So there's just so many different messagings that I think kind of contribute to your frame. And all of it can be shifted, but it's building a new muscle around communication and what you want it to look like.
Wow, that's incredible. So what about about people who are dealing with self-doubt? Like, let's say in the career space, they want to start a new business or a new venture. How would you help them kind of overcome their self-doubt?
Yeah, I think so much of it is like we have all heard probably of analysis paralysis. Like the more we think of it, the more I call it like the golden handcuffs.
Wow.
I think it's about taking small, measurable actions that are, again, like that one step, that one ladder towards your goal. But the first thing I would do is, okay, self-doubt. What are you aiming for? I'd get really, really clear on what they want.
Mm.
And then we'd go backwards. So if you want to be a leader where you walk in and own the room, you own your presentations, your arms are back, your eyes are direct, you're confident, you're clear. Okay, then we're going to go backwards and we're going to break it down, right? Because so much of that is nonverbal communication. So much of it is your energy of walking in a room and just owning it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part is dealing with those self-doubt thoughts
Yeah.
can somehow take over at times, and it's quieting the noise. Like that is just noise. That
Right.
is who you are. It's the noise that's trying to just distract you from what you want. And I always tell clients, pretend it's a radio station and you're just turning down the volume. You're turning down the self-doubt sound, and then you're turning up something super empowering. So
Yeah.
for you, that could be like a mantra related to your faith of like, I can do anything. God is with me.
You're right.
I'm capable of hard things. God is watching me. I'm
Mm.
strong. Or it
Yeah.
could be something that just literally contrasts to the self-doubt. I am a warrior. I can do this
Yeah.
one step at a time, one action at a time, 1% change.
I
And I,
love that. So I love two things about what you're saying because you
yeah,
begin with the end in mind. So we kind of have this visualization of, okay, where I want to be, who I want to become. That's great. And then breaking it down in the actionable steps of becoming that. And then the affirmations, the positive affirmations, which combat the negativity or the self-doubt. That's great. Highly effective. Now, you
yeah,
emphasize
yeah. And I would say like, yeah,
no,
and I would
go
say if
on.
you're just gonna, when we're talking about, okay, go on.
No, no,
No, I
no,
was
go
gonna
on.
say, we're talking a lot about habits and communication and creating change. And I think one of the biggest, misconceptions is it has to be these big changes that you make to create the life you want. And it really doesn't. Like if we're talking about self-doubt, if you wake up, and I'm big on cues, and every time you get out of your bed and your feet touch the floor, and that's your cue, if you just every day say to yourself 3 affirmations, if you do that for 7 weeks, that truly starts to change your neural pathways and changes the way you think because you are consistently associating yourself with a positive statement versus all the doubtful, negative, critical things that we know we're our worst enemies and it's not serving us.
Right.
So again, it's turning down the critical and then creating some form of cue, like the feet on the floor, or when you open your car with your clicker, your keys,
Yeah.
and just literally thinking of 3 new things. I am resilient, I am strong, I am made to do really great things, whatever it is. But that's just a really simple way to build the muscle. It doesn't have to be this huge monumental transformation.
Right. Absolutely. Repetitive action,
Yeah.
repetition is kind of the key here.
Yes.
So you work with professionals, business
Tons. Yeah.
leaders, executives who are seeking career clarity and direction for the future. What do you
Yeah.
find is the biggest mistake people are making when in choosing a career path or in moving forward towards their goals?
That's a great, great question. I think they're staying safe. I think they're
Mm.
staying in their comfort zone, right? They're doing what they know. We did a survey once of just, in a room, how many people have stayed at their job because they're afraid of what's next. They don't love their job. They don't love getting up in the morning. They don't even really like what they're actually doing all day, but
Right.
they stay. You stay because you're so afraid of what's next, or what if I fail? What if I interview and I don't get the job? Or what if I want to completely pivot and do a whole new direction, but I have no experience and I'm too old or it's too late, right? You
Yeah.
start making all these excuses that keep you in the exact same spot. So
Wow.
I would say it paralyzes you. Your
Hmm.
thoughts then paralyze you. So I would say that would be number one. And then I would say number two is there's such a wave right now of bringing vulnerability into leadership. And
Yeah.
I think our leaders and our version of leadership running companies, I think it's changing. I think
Mm.
it's not about being the one at the front that has all the answers. It's being with your people.
Yeah.
It's actually promoting motivation within, being the person that you get to pass on now and pass on your leadership and help others go find their dream, go be successful, go crush it, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
it's working with them, not down at them or not to them.
So
It's,
true.
yeah. So I think that's what I learned. I mean, we did a presentation at Wells Fargo, which is a bank in Charlotte. And, it's just unbelievable how many people are like vulnerable in my job. How do I do that?
Yeah.
And it was an amazing discussion because you can still be a leader, you can still be a CEO, you can still be a boss mom and bring vulnerability into who you are.
Yeah, and relatability. But you touched on something so important about, like I think we all have natural God-given talents and gifts,
Yes.
right? Like imagine
Yes.
someone is an amazing drummer and they're supposed to be making music, okay?
Yeah.
But they've been, it's been beaten into them that they have to go, chase the dollar. So they
Yeah.
go get a 9 to 5 selling insurance, miserable, and
Mhm.
whereas if they had more faith in their dreams, and
Mhm.
not, they could live a life of purpose and fulfillment and happiness and prosperity, because God will always prosper us in the gift He gives us, right?
Yes,
It's like I
100%.
feel like people have more faith in their failure than they do in their future.
Yes, yes. It's kind of like there's some astronomical statistic. If someone says to us 15 amazing things and one that's slightly negative, that's the one we're going to hang on to. And
Wow.
I think that's how we think about ourselves. Like the self-doubt, the fear of failure is going to completely overpower our gifts. Or
Right.
like when you connect it to like prosperity with God, our minds automatically go to the negative. And it's retraining your brain to really believe like you are capable of driving your own ship, you are capable of creating your own life, and you have to just believe it's not going to happen overnight. It has to be small steps. And that's why I love coaching because it's an accountability structure.
Yeah.
So, all my clients, I have a weekly check-in. They tell me what actions they're going to create midweek. We touch base, we do spot coaching. By the end of the month, we come back to the goals they set at the beginning of the month. Where are we? Where do we want to reset for next month? So you're with the client, where when you're a therapist, you're kind of the professional talking to the client, educating. Coaching's much more of a partnership. And that's why I think, especially with teams and businesses, it gets me so excited to create change with them.
Yes. And it's what's that saying? It's a marathon, not a sprint, because
Yeah,
sometimes the changes and the growth uh, may take years,
it could.
for the goal to come to fruition. But it's a consistent application of a certain system or process in place for it
Yeah,
to develop in
right,
business or in relationships. So
right.
that patience is key, and being willing to, like you say, sort of go the distance and over time work the process of transformation and growth.
Yeah, and I mean, we did something last week around imposter syndrome, and like I said, everyone has that, right? That's not a pandemic. It's not an illness. Everyone goes through feelings of, wow, maybe I should be more confident, or maybe I should talk like that person, or maybe I need to lead like that person. And what we talked about was if you picture growth or just change as if you're building a house and you're building the foundation and it's literally just one brick at a time, right? And over
Mm,
time, that foundation is strong, it's solid, it's right, it's whole, right?
yeah,
And so
exactly.
sometimes that metaphor helps people realize they can do it and they just have to do it in small steps.
Right.
And believe,
Yeah.
like back to your drummer, right? If you worked with someone and said, okay, let's just say for sure in 2 years your job is exactly where you wanted it to be. Would you move forward or would you go do the insurance job? And 99% of the time, they're not going to take the insurance job.
Right.
It's the fact that they don't know. So the
Mm.
unknown is the paralysis golden handcuff.
My God, it's so true.
Really is. Like if we had a ball that could say, "Hey, it's going to work out." Like I can tell you in 3 years you're going to find someone that you want to marry, right? Or you're going to get that CEO job you've been dreaming of. It's just going to take a while. Everyone will be like, great, I know I'm going to get it, so I'm going to keep going.
Believe it or not, when I first started the magazine, and this was in my growing relationship with
Yeah.
Jesus, because I'm a Christian, he gave me the vision of what it could be. So you can, and I asked God, I wanted a map of my life. And so he kind of gave me the end vision of what it could be. And then
Yeah.
I started building it from scratch. So you can have some certainty of where you're going to end up, but you got to be willing to take the leap of faith.
Yeah. And I think trust the process, right?
Yes.
And there are going to be bad days. Like I always tell my client, I think I'm a realist. I think I bring a lot of humor and sarcasm where there are going to be days where we all just don't feel good.
It's true.
You
There's
don't feel
some days where
confident.
even still I feel like, "Oh, why am I doing, but I think that's just the ocean of emotion we all go through.
It is. And I know I use a lot of metaphors, but even when I was younger, I would say change is not like a flat ocean. There's waves.
Mm,
And there's going to be days where you're riding high and you're feeling amazing and it's going to come down, but it's going to come back up.
right.
And I
No, I
think,
love that analogy.
yeah. And back to your whole emotional regulation, if more people could just sit in the feeling of it going down,
Mm,
they would realize it's going to come back up, but we want to push that feeling away. We don't want it. We don't want to feel bad per
right.
se or not as confident. And I think if
Mm.
we all could just sit with it, knowing the wave's going to come back up again, we would hang on longer for
It's
the
so
dream. Like,
true. It's so true. Like on those days,
right?
I just won't work. I'll just
Exactly.
unplug from the push, the go go go,
Yes.
because sometimes your spirit needs to rest, your body needs to
Yes.
recharge, and so it's part of also. Well, let's talk about that, the work life balance. We're
Oh,
mind, body, spirit. So what do you encourage people to do to kind of maintain that balance of our
yeah.
being?
I think you pretty much modeled self-care beautifully. Like you said, if I get up, I unplug. That's probably you listening to your body, and your brain is telling you that it's overdone and it needs a rest. I did a ton of work on burnout in the pandemic. There were so many people. I was in education, I was running a school, and it was real. And I think if everyone would have just listened to their body and said, it's okay that I feel scared, or it's okay that I'm stressed, it's okay that I'm barely hanging on, my tank is empty.
Right.
What can I do next tomorrow just to refuel
Yeah,
just a little
exactly.
bit? We would all be able to bounce back. But the
Right.
problem, unlike you, is most people just keep going and they keep going and pushing and pushing. And then stress becomes burnout, and your brain is not able to conceptually thrive
Yeah.
because it is overdone. So,
Right.
always that oxygen metaphor, message max on first, especially as a mom. So many moms are like, you can't do that. You have to put on your kids first. I'm like, well, what's the result if you don't?
Right.
You're going to have a cranky mother who is really, really exhausted, not fueled, not present, irritable, angry, right? I could go on.
Yeah.
So it's like that with business. So I actually have all of my clients try to have two self-care techniques or things they do every week. And that could change, right? One could be a date night that you actually consistently do go, or maybe you walk your dog after your lunch every day for 10 minutes just to get air. It could be anything, but intentionally picking two things, I think gives people more fuel because it's theirs. They're choosing to do it and it's
Mm.
for them.
Yes, I love that. Like for me, I go back to my faith because my relationship
Yeah.
with the Lord is so important to me. Like he'll give me dreams, but he'll give me a dream of a gas station, and then I do my dream analysis, and it says you need to take a rest and refill your tank, and it's so true because I'll feel exhausted that day, and I'm just like, and I'll literally do nothing. And
Hmm.
that is exactly what I need to be able to the next day be ready to take on the world again. Like we
Like,
must be gentle with ourselves and be willing to give us the rest and take the time to like give your body what it needs, your spirit what it needs, whatever.
absolutely. And yeah, you just reminded me, when you talk about consistency, there's so many people that I think have such a strong sense of faith. but they don't
Mm,
know how to put it in action. Like they know it cognitively, but they
right.
don't know how to put their faith in action. So I know I have a faith-based app that every day when my alarm goes off, it goes off as well. And
Mm,
it's a notification and it's just a journal prompt about the day. And I
yeah.
literally just sit there and I think, where can I actually act out God today in my life? And how can I
Yeah.
bring this to my purpose? So I think
Yes.
I can think it can look different for anyone, and it can be faith-based or self-care, but it's intentional.
Right.
It's like when you talked about the gas station, like that's an intentional connection you're making with your dream analysis, and you're actually living it out
Right.
what your knowledge and experience taught you.
Yeah, well, I'm listening to sort of the guidance of God. And this is why I think like we can be the most high powered, most successful executives, with all the money in the world, but that might satisfy our physical, but we mustn't neglect our spiritual. And that
Yeah.
is that element of faith and listening to our intuition and what we really need.
Yeah.
Not the material world, what we're striving for, because that's there. And
Right.
I think when we have a harmony of taking care of all the aspects of our being, when we can really thrive and step into the fullness of our purpose and our prosperity, because prosperity isn't just money in the bank. Prosperity is a perpetual trajectory of growth in every facet of our being, mentally,
I love
emotionally,
it.
spiritually, physically, all of it. But we need balance.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, you find a lot of people, I always make the analogy that, January 1st, everyone's excited to get in shape, right? And you go to whatever gym or workout class, and then by like January 20th, there's less cars, right?
Yeah, it's
I think
true.
to your point, if you're not connected to the bigger why,
Yeah.
it's going to be really hard to create change or create a major life goal because there has to be some other reason why you're doing it.
Yes.
Everyone wants to make money, but what for? Like
Right.
if you were given the millions, what are you going to do with it? What's going to change your life and change your prosperity, your wholeness, your purpose? So
That's
I think
right.
it's connecting to that higher level
Yeah.
will help the consistent habits actually stay in practice,
It's
or you're going to
true.
lose motivation because you're not connected to the why.
It's
It's
so true. Oh
yeah.
my
So
goodness.
so I love that. And I love that you were able to create what you want with your magazine. And I mean, that's amazing. You did it.
And again, it's been a long journey, 10 years, but there'll be a project that maybe God will tell me put it on the back burner, but then he'll bring it back around because it's not the right time. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
it takes time to grow sort of your dream life, let's call it, right? But you must
Mhm.
understand it's a process, and we have this life, and it might, and that's the beauty of it, one day at a
Right.
time, and to fulfill years of a beautiful life well lived.
Yeah. And I
So,
would also, oh, I was just gonna say one thing. I think, I always try to break things down for whether I'm working with a couple, a high-powered exec, or a team that don't let changing your life be this overwhelming cloud of just so many things. I always say start with one area, and I promise it's a domino effect. If you can create change in one part of your life and show up differently and see it come to fruition, you can do that anywhere. And I can't even tell you how many clients, and it's not because of me, but how many clients will say, I made this change in my job. I finally did the thing. I finally asked for this. I finally got the job. And then my marriage changed. And then my relationship with my kids changed. And then my friendships changed.
you see.
Or I realized I need to cut out friends because I'm friends with people for the wrong reasons. You start to see it everywhere, but you have to make that one shift in one direction first. And
Yes.
then we can look at it and how that connects to other areas.
Amazing. Such a golden gem for us to end on. How can people get in touch with you, reach you, keep up with
Thank
you?
you. Yeah, my name always gets spelt wrong, but it's on all of my platforms. It's Meegan Whelan. So it's MEEGAN WHELAN.com is my website. And then my Instagram is just Meegan_Whelan. And then, yeah, we do a 30-minute consult. We have an audit. So anyone who wants to just go through the audit and do a quick consult, we'll do that complimentary. And yeah, I'm available on both those and LinkedIn.
I love it. What an incredibly insightful conversation. It's been such an honor to spend some time with you, and thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too. God bless you. Bye, Meegan.
Bye.